Hello everybody, this is Nicole Marvell. I'm your Director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. Really excited to be with you today to start talking a little bit more about our Build, Learn, Grow stabilization grants. So we're really fortunate to have received funding from Congress through the American Rescue Plan to issue stabilization grants to all child cares in Indiana, with some caveats here that we'll talk about a little later in terms of eligibility. But really excited about the opportunity and really grateful to Congress for this investment in early learning. So the purpose of these grants is really to think about how we stabilize the childcare market while building capacity. These are non-competitive grants and designed to really provide short-term funding to all of you who have faced increased cost and challenges brought on by COVID-19. We're hoping that these payments allow you to stabilize your operations and then build capacity for future. In order to be eligible, early care and education as well as out-of-school time programs have to be either a licensed center, a licensed family child care home, an unlicensed registered ministry, or a legally licensed exempt provider. You also have to have been licensed by March 11th, 2021. So if you were licensed after that date, unfortunately, you're not eligible to apply for this opportunity. You do need to be open and currently serving children on the date of the application. So when you apply for your grant, you need to be open and operating. Please know though that if you're temporarily closed for that 14 days or less due to a COVID-19 exposure, you can still apply. That doesn't make you ineligible. You also need to be in good standing with our regulations for licensed and registered care. In this part of the program, though, Head Start and Early Head Start grantees are not eligible because of the funding that they receive directly from Congress, but we will allow child care partnerships to apply. So let's talk a little bit more about eligibility. So first, if you want to see a full listing of eligibility FAQs, you can go to our stabilization.buildlearngrow.org site, where we've already uploaded a lot of information there, and so hopefully your questions will be answered. But if not, feel free to let us know so that we know we need to add some things. So first, what does it mean to be a program in good standing? So to be in good standing for the purposes of this grant, you must be compliant with your regulations for your license or registration. And you cannot be in an active repayment process or the subject of an active investigation or enforcement by our office. So if our licensing team has taken action against your license and you're in process of that, you wouldn't be eligible until that gets resolved. If you've been found to have spent funds inappropriately in the past and you're repaying those funds to our office, you would not be eligible right now either. Or if we are actively investigating you for purposes of fraud or abuse, then you would not be eligible either. Your program does not need to be CCDF eligible to receive the stabilization payment. So unlike many of the other opportunities we've had where you did have to be, this one you don't. So you can receive these funding as long as you meet the criteria we talked about earlier. So licensed by that March date and in good status and open and serving children, then you would be eligible to apply. The question about if you're eligible but you don't want to receive the funds, can you decline? The answer is yes. You definitely don't have to participate in this if you don't want to. We highly encourage you to, because this is funding that we hope will help your program grow and be successful. But if you would like to not participate, you don't have to. So the question about are public, non-public, and charter schools eligible to apply? Yes, they are. Those who have been issued a license or registration from our office are eligible to apply. And there will be discussion later about how some of the funds have to be spent, and there's a 20% requirement about spending these funds on staff wages and benefits. However, for public schools, private schools, non-public schools, you would be exempt from that because we know that many of you have collective bargaining agreements that don't allow you to necessarily make those changes, and so we want to be sensitive to that. There may also be additional stipulations for the use of funds within your organization, and we'll outline those within the application that are really specific to public schools. Okay, so in terms of how you can use the funding, you can use the stabilization grant funds across any of these categories as allowable expenses to cover the cost of expenses that occurred anywhere from January 31st, 2020, so when the public health emergency began, through September 30th of 2023. And so this is really important because you can go back. So if you had to, let's say, take out an additional loan just to meet your operating expenses, or had to do things really just because of COVID-19 that had you increase some debt, you can go back and pay those expenses with these funds. So here are the categories. So the first being personnel costs, such as payroll, benefits, if you've had to bring contractors in to help offset other things, the premium pay, staff bonuses, wage increases, those kinds of things. All of those things that go into just stabilize your operations and then operating your business every day. So things like purchasing a child care information management software, financial management software, or participating in shared services. Classroom supplies, food, all of those things could count as well. Health and safety training, so for things like CPR, first aid, medication administration, anything related to health and safety that includes training that has an expense, you could certainly use these funds to offset those costs. Mental health supports, and that can be counseling or other mental health supports for your employees, for families that you're supporting. It can be training, professional development around this topic, anything that might be needed to really ensure that, one, the health and well-being of your staff are being taken into consideration, and the health and well-being of your students and their families. Anything related to COVID-19, so PPE, cleaning supplies, if you had to put in plexiglass dividers, those kinds of things are all allowable expenses. Facility fees, maintenance or improvements such as rent, lease, mortgage payments, utilities, all those things that make up your operating cost. Things like playground upgrades, installing railings, renovating bathrooms if you need to do that to allow for more accessibility or to impact things that have been impacted by COVID-19. All of those things could count as well. So we've really tried to make the application really simple for you, and a big shout out to the providers who helped test the application for us. Your feedback was so incredibly important, and for those of you who are not in that group, please know that your colleagues have really been super helpful in trying to make this an easy process for all of you. But first, what you're going to do is log in to your iLead account. So all of you do that now pretty regularly. If you need help getting into iLead, you can certainly call the Solutions Center at Early Learning Indiana, and they can help you with getting your account set up if for some reason you don't have one. We will open up the week of October 4th, and you can apply anytime beginning that week of October 4th through December 30th. So you only need to apply once. But you can apply anytime. I do encourage you to do that early just because it'll allow us to get the funding to you more quickly. But for some reason, if someone waits until the end of December, that's okay as long as you get in before December 30th. Grants will be awarded on a rolling basis, and they are not competitive. So you're not competing against your colleagues down the street for the funding. We have enough funding to support all of you who apply. So again, please come in and do that quickly. And then upon award, the funds will be electronically deposited into your bank accounts within 3 weeks of us approving your grant. So the goal is really to get it to you very, very quickly from the time that you apply. So here's what the process is going to look like for you. So first, you're going to log into your iLead account and click the button on the home page that says the Stabilization Grant Portal. Then you're going to click the Stabilization Grant tile and start your application. And again, this will make a lot of sense as you come in to see it. We want you to read through and accept those attestations, and those are all the things that you're agreeing to when you take the funds. And then you're going to review and confirm the information about your program. So your program information is going to come over from our main state data system. So things like the name of your program and your license number and address and all of those things. But we want you to take a look and make sure that those things are right, because could be that somehow they're not. But we're hoping to make that easy so you don't have to enter those things in. We then want you to enter your enrollment and staffing information about your program. So things like the age groups that you're serving by classroom, the typical number of staff present at one time, your average attendance, and then your maximum capacity. This is going to help us understand what your cost might look like based on the number of kids that you're supporting and the staff that you have there. The tool is then going to do some things in the background based upon some cost surveying that we did to help us estimate your monthly operating expenses. We want you to look at that and tell us if that seems to be about right. And if it doesn't, then you're going to get to tell us that too. Once we then decide with you on that amount, you're going to enter or confirm your banking and routing information so that you can receive electronic transfer of these funds. And then lastly, you do need to tell us a little bit about how you plan to. It's okay if that plan changes, but for our federal reporting, we do have to indicate how programs intended to use the funds. And so again, it's okay if you thought you were going to use them for one thing and you end up using them for something different. That's all right, because we will ask you to report to us how you use them later too. But this is just to give us an indication as to what you think you might use the funding for. Okay, so some FAQs around the application process itself. So if the question is the online application the only way to apply? The answer to that is yes. We will not have a paper application. So you will have to come in through iLead and use a computer or mobile device to apply. You don't have to complete the full application at once. You can save it and come back to it. So let's say you get into it and realize, oh gosh, I need some more information. That's okay. You definitely can do that and come back to it. In terms of multi-site organizations, you do have to apply for each site because we're calculating cost based on each license number. So I'm sorry, I know that for some of you that will be a little bit daunting. But again, the application is really simple. It shouldn't take very long. So hopefully that won't pose too much of a problem for you. The languages that the application is going to be in are English, Spanish, French, and Burmese. So we wanted to be sure to hit all of you out there in the universe who have other languages than English, just to be sure that you could effectively apply. So again, if you need help during this time, we're going to give you some information here in a little bit about how to get that help, but you can always call the Solution Center, the Spark Help Desk, or our office directly, and we certainly can walk you through any questions you have. So grant awards will vary by program, and they're calculated at the program site level using this cost estimation model. So the estimation formula considers things like your program type, meaning are you a home, a center, a ministry, an exempt program, your average attendance, and we're asking for average because we know that for most programs it can ebb and flow from day to day how many kiddos you have in a particular classroom. Your staffing costs, so salaries, benefits, any of those pieces that go into your staffing cost, your quality level, and your geography, because we understand that sometimes what it costs is very different in certain parts of the state than it is in others based upon things simply like real estate cost. You'll then receive a total award amount during that application process so that you're aware of the funding that you should expect to receive. The award total will reflect what we believe is 3 months of your operating expenses, and that would be the sum that you get. So please know that programs are going to be capped at $500,000 per site for the duration of the program. We do anticipate having at least one more round after this for another 3-month block. But just know that at some point, if you've reached $500,000 in a stabilization payment, that would be the cap. But that is per site. So if you're, again, a multi-site organization, that's not for your entire organization, but definitely by site. So in most cases, we believe that you'll receive that award confirmation and the grant amount at the end of the grant application, and it should be fairly reflective of your cost. But if, however, your grant needs to undergo further review before we can do that, then those decisions will be made within 7 business days. Upon award, your grant funds will be electronically deposited into the bank account within 3 weeks of the grant approval. Your application could be denied based on your program's inability to meet the eligibility criteria. So for example, if you were just licensed last week, you wouldn't be able to apply and we couldn't approve a grant for you. Or if there's falsified information on an application, then we may have to deny that application as well. But we don't anticipate that happening very often. So again, there are some attestations or terms and conditions of accepting grants that you'll have to look at, and here are some of them. So one is that everything you've given us is accurate to the best of your knowledge and that you'll let us know of changes to the information provided during the grant, including if you choose to close your child care program. So if you've chosen at that point that you're going to close and not reopen, that would be something you need to let us know. You're agreeing that your funds will be expended in accordance with the allowable expenses, and that you will follow required tracking and reporting that you're going to be asked to do. That you'll maintain compliance with directives outlined in any executive order by the governor or guidance from our office, and to the greatest extent possible, implement practices in lines with guidance from the CDC. So this includes things like masking, social distancing, trying to keep kids in cohorts together, all of these things that we know you're all doing today, but that you agree that you will continue to do those things, and as directives may change, that you'll make those modifications. We are asking that at least 25% of the funds that you receive will be invested towards increasing staff wages or benefits. And so please know that these awarded funds are not there to supplant or replace your existing revenue and cost, but rather they must invest in new wages and benefits and enhancements. So for example, if you've been paying your staff out of your just general revenue of a program, you can't then use this and say, well, I've met my 25%. So this is on top of that. One of the reasons for this is because we want to be sure that we're investing in the workforce, that we're helping all of you figure out ways to staff back up to reopen some classrooms, and really thinking about long-term how we build a more sustainable system. We're also asking that financial relief or support can be provided for your enrolled families or some subset of them through efforts like establishing a tuition assistance fund, creating a sliding fee scale. You could participate in the Build, Learn, Grow Scholarship Fund, writing off tuition debt, etc. And again, it will be up to you what percentage or part of this that you use, or if you've really focused on your families who are lowest income, but we do ask that you think about how families also see the benefit from this investment. And then you also understand that all unspent funds have to be returned in the case of the child care program closure. So if you would receive this and then, next week decide that you need to close, you would be expected to return the funding. Okay. So providers must also agree to not reduce existing staff pay or benefits. So you can't reduce wages during this time. We're asking you to not lay off employees or furlough staff. Use these funds to pay your taxes, or use these funds to pay for expenses already covered by other federal, state, or local relief funds or grants. And so what I would say to this last bullet is, if you've received other things, just be sure you understand those terms and conditions and what they can pay for and can't pay for. And just be sure if you have questions about that if it's come from our office, you can ask us those things. If it's come from the Department of Education, ask them questions. But we want to be sure that you're tracking these funds separately, and then not, using them to pay for things that maybe you've already received money to pay for. So the deadline for your program to spend the funds is September 30th of 2023. So you have some time to spend them, which is great. Do they need to be paid back? So they're not considered a loan, and child care providers who comply with the funding requirements would not be required to pay them back. Now, if you're audited and it's determined that you've used them inappropriately, then yes, you would have to pay them back. Or if you close, you would need to pay them back. But otherwise, no, these are funds that we want you to use for the expenses that you have. So what happens if the program doesn't comply with the terms and conditions of the grant? So if you found to violate those terms and conditions, you would be asked to repay those. It could be deemed that you were being fraudulent, and then that kind of takes a different path with our office that we can walk you through. And it may make you ineligible for future grant rounds for other funding. And so it's really important that you comply with the terms and conditions of the grant. And so the question about, do you have to return funds if you close? Programs that close permanently during the grant period will be asked to return any of the unused funds. So we're going to hope that you all stay open, but understand sometimes that isn't the case, and just ask them that you pay those funds back or return what you've not spent. So there are going to be some reporting and tracking requirements. So in receiving your funds, you are going to have to agree to complete at least 2 grant reports. So those reports will be completed using the online portal, so the same way that you applied for the funds. And we'll collect information on your use of the funds, mostly because we want to be sure that you're using them correctly, but also we do have federal reporting requirements that we're going to have to give back to the Federal Office of Child Care about how the funds were spent. Federal regulations do require that if you receive these federal funds, that you keep financial documents for 5 years. So expenditure records and supporting documentation to how the funding was spent is going to be really, really important. So that could be receipts for how you paid your mortgage or rent, utility statements, your payroll and benefit records, invoices for things that you purchased like supplies and materials, and documentation of benefits provided to staff, such as if you paid for their insurance cost or tuition reimbursement. So it is going to be really important that you set up a system to help you in terms of keeping track of how these funds were spent. We're not going to ask you to submit proof of those things, so you don't have to give us your receipts unless requested. So if you undergo an audit, then certainly you would be required to give us those. But not everyone has to necessarily supply those at the end of the grant period. So we are partnering with Spark Learning Lab to give some pre and post award support and technical assistance, because we know that this is a great deal of money, and some of you may need some help planning for how you would like to spend it. Some of you may need help with tracking systems, all of those things. So there will be things about how you support around calculating expenses and understanding the tax implications of accepting these grant funds. So we want to be sure you're thinking through those things. Spark will host webinars for field experts to share best practices for the use of grant funds and peer sharing events. We believe that you all can really come together, learn from each other. And then some post-award technical assistance, including a cohort-based approach to support programs as they account for the funds, explore and make decisions for the use, and then track those related expenses. So again, we'll put home providers with home providers, centers with centers, etc., and see if we can't gain some synergy around what you're all doing. So you can learn a lot more about the stabilization grants to you at stabilization.buildlearngrow.org. You absolutely can call the help desk, and we've provided to you there the link and the 1-800 number, and then live chat is also available there for you. Really encourage you to go there as you have questions. We certainly want to answer those, and we know this is a little bit of a different process than what we've used before, so certainly understand that you may have questions, and I know that the team at Spark is really there ready to help. And again, those applications are going to open up the week of October 4th. So thank you so much for your time today. Again, we'll have some ongoing support for you, some other sessions for you to log into. But again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out, and really look forward to you all coming in and applying for these grants. We'll talk soon.